Lord God, we need you. I need you. I guess every one of us here needs you. Some of us just recognize that a little better than others. Find us here, Lord, and challenge us this day. In your mighty name, the name of Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Messiah. I have a confession. I'm going to confess what I believe. The early church used to do that. The early church had creeds so that people could remember what it is that they believed. This is what I believe. I'm blessed, I'm blessed, I'm blessed. Hallelujah, I am blessed. I know Christ Jesus died for me. I'm blessed, I'm blessed, I'm blessed. By grace alone I'm free. Christ has atoned for me. By grace alone I have a home with God eternally. With confidence I say, His Spirit will guide my way. God will empower me every hour to live and serve today. By faith, I'm saved today. By the life, the truth, the way, my faith in Him now hides my sin. That faith allows me to say, I'm blessed, I'm blessed, I'm blessed. Give thanks and proclaim I'm blessed. Salvation's mine. By God's design, I'm blessed, I'm blessed, I'm blessed. I'm blessed, I'm blessed, I'm blessed. Now, I'm going to sing you a song that I used to get to sing at the Grand Ole Opry on the Grand Ole Gospel Time show on the Opry's Friday nights. Joanne Cash Yates, Johnny Cash's sister, sang it with me up there a number of times, and her brother John and her recorded it in a live concert. It was quite an experience to see. It's a real simple song. It's called Jesus is Lord. Jesus is Lord, my Lord, and I love Him. Jesus is Lord, my Lord, and I love Him so. Jesus is Lord, my Lord, and I love Him, I love Him. Jesus is Lord, my Lord, and I love Him so. You know, if we say that we love God, we need to recognize that He's a sovereign Lord. He's a king. We're subjects, servants of the King. It's a high call. Jesus is King, my King, and I love Him. Jesus is King, my King, and I love Him so. Jesus is King, my King, and I love Him, I love Him. Jesus is King, my King, and I love Him so. The world is in chaos. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to recognize that. And what the world really needs is not more money. It's not more power. The world really needs is more peace. Everyone is screaming inside for peace because they don't have peace. Most of them don't have peace because of bad decisions they've made, and the worst decision that they made is to not fall in love with God. Jesus is peace, my peace, and I love him. Jesus is peace, my peace, and I love him so. Jesus is peace, my peace, and I love him. I love him. Jesus is peace, my peace, and I love him so. Jesus is Lord, my Lord, and I love him so. Jesus is Lord, my Lord, and I love him so. Jesus is Lord, my Lord, and I love him so. I had a great opportunity to hear people worshiping to that song, one of the songs that I had written in Hungarian when I used to work with the underground church. And then I got to watch them. They worship with that song in Yugoslavian and in Czechoslovakian and in German and Dutch. And at a point in my ministry where I was sort of thinking about hanging it up, I got a letter that was so encouraging to me. And it was a letter from some ministers that it was an illegal gathering of Christians. Thousands of people gathered in Bulgaria with the police and the military surrounding them to have the first public worship of God in modern history in Bulgaria. And they opened singing Jesus is Lord, that song in Bulgarian. When I got that letter, I was really touched. God loves me. Now, some of you, you're his favorite. He really loves you. But he loves me too. Because he loves me, I will follow him. Because he loves me, I will follow him. Because he loves me, because he loves me, because he loves me, I will follow him. Because he loves me, I will serve him. Because he loves me, I will serve him. Because he loves me, because he loves me, because he loves me, I will serve him. My wife and I and our little children, some of them were just infants, we were smuggling some Christian materials to the underground in former Soviet bloc nations. And when that ministry trip was done, we'd crossed many borders. We never really had a good plan how we were going to smuggle all these things in. There was no book that gave us any instructions or anything. So we were really depending on the Lord. But when it was all done and we finally were exiting the last of the communist countries we were in, I was so thankful for God's faithfulness, how he helped us in so many ways. And you need to know that you're his favorite. If he helped me, I know he will help you. I don't know what you need. I don't know what your struggle is. I don't know what you're afraid of. I don't know what you are trying to do for the Lord or what you need to do, what the Lord has called you to do. But I'm telling you, you're his favorite. and he will help you. And as we were coming out of the last of the communist countries into a free country, I just started singing this song. And because he loves me, I will trust him. Because he loves me, I will trust him. Because he loves me. Because he loves me. Because he loves me, I will trust him. Because he loves me, I will follow him. Because he loves me, I will follow him. Because he loves me. Because he loves me. Because he loves me, I will follow him. Well, thank you for letting me sing a few songs. Now, no. Now, it might go to my head if you clap, and you don't know what I'm going to say next. So, careful what you clap for. That's perfect. Yes, this is my analog PowerPoint. I know in modern churches everyone expects great high-tech presentations. This is a great church, but you're not getting a high-tech presentation. I've got a lot of spaghetti after my name, and what that all means is I can't make a real PowerPoint presentation. So what I want to do, I have a sermon title, The Real Preacher Returns Soon. So will Jesus look busy. Now, I've got some quotes. Good preachers either have jokes or quotes. Pastor Steve told the really good joke, so I'm coming with some quotes. If you know who said this, don't shout it out or anything. He's a Nobel Prize winner in literature. One of the things he said that I love is, never hold discussions with the monkey when the organ grinder is in the room. Talk to the boss, okay? He said, when the eagles are silent, the parrots begin to jabber. Look around church when the pastor's not here. This is really accurate. He said, an appeaser is one who feeds a crocodile while hoping it will eat him last. And they're everywhere. Appeasers are everywhere. If something doesn't change, they will also be eaten. We make a living by what we get. We make a life by what we give. He said, you have enemies? Good. That means you've stood up for something sometime in your life. In a way, you can somehow know a person by their enemies. Not always, but sometimes. I have some terrible enemies that I'm personally facing. I have enemies that are big enemies. AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, Microsoft, Google, the Federal Communication Commission. Big enemies. I don't mean my cell phone bill. I mean, Google wants to stop me from what I'm doing. They want to literally do what I'm doing. It's a long story. Forget it. This guy said, attitude is a little thing that makes a big difference. It really is. He said, a lie gets halfway around the world before the truth has a chance to get its pants on. These things are true. There are things going on that most folks are completely unaware of, and they They think they're hearing the truth, but it's a lie. And we're insufficiently prepared to know the difference. We are not sufficiently sophisticated to sometimes recognize the truth from a lie. This gentleman said, "It has been said that democracy is the worst form of government, except all the others that have been tried." He had some interesting comments about politics. He said, "The inherent vice of capitalism," and if you've looked at my Facebook page, you'll know who said it because I've quoted this on my Facebook page. "The inherent vice of capitalism is the unequal sharing of blessings. The inherent virtue of socialism is the equal sharing of miseries." I love it. He said, "The best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter." He said, "To be conservative at 20 is heartless." Any young people out there, you shouldn't be conservative when you're young. But he also said, "To be a liberal at 60 is plain idiocy." Is it true? This will give it away. You probably know this. He said, "If you're going through hell, keep going." Duh, don't stop. And then he said, "If you have an important point to make, don't try to be subtle or clever. Use a pile driver. Hit the point once, then come back and hit it again, then hit it a third time, a tremendous whack." Saying it differently, don't bury the lead. I'm not going to bury the lead today because I'm here to challenge you. I am here to challenge every one of you. You can't fire me. I'm not the preacher here. I don't get paid to preach. In a couple of minutes, you're going to figure out why. I'm here to challenge you. So just take it for what it's worth. You can reject it or you can accept it, but you are going to be challenged. This same gentleman said, "Wars are not won by evacuation." I'm talking about Winston Churchill, okay? Wars are not won by evacuation. What did Jesus say? This is the lead. "Occupy till I come." Now that text comes from Luke chapter 19. A good preacher would expound on Luke chapter 19. Go home and read chapter 19 of Luke. Investigate it for yourselves. Don't trust something I'm going to say about it. Have the gumption to just see what it says. Luke chapter 19. I've got stories to tell, okay? I'm going to tell you some stories. You go home and read Luke chapter 19. Jesus said this in the context of a parable. And if you read that chapter, you will learn about salvation, you will learn about expectation, hope, kingship, stewardship, reward, and judgment. But between salvation and reward or judgment, Jesus said, "Occupy till I come." And this is not like Occupy Wall Street. This is not about protesting. It's not about, I happened to be in our nation's capital during the Occupy Wall Street movement, and it looked like a bunch of vagrants out there in tents, just unhappy because they didn't have anything and they wanted something, and their method to get it was to try and block traffic or complain. There's better ways to do things. That's not the kind of Occupy Jesus was talking about. The word in the Greek, nobody cares about here, okay? And a good preacher would explain it. I'm not. It's the only usage in the entire Bible of that word, occupy. We get the word pragmatic from that word, but it's translated also to busy oneself with. It's about business, like to do business or to trade or to make profit. But occupy is a military term, as in an occupation force. Place yourself in this situation as part of an occupation force. I'm not called to conquer. I'm not called to dominate. I'm called to occupy. Webster's says it's to take and hold possession of as by conquest. But in the context that I'm bringing it to you, we are in a war, in a culture war, and in a war for our families, in a war for our souls, in a war for defining or redefining everything or anything that's important. But in this war, I'm going to ask, am I a victor or a victim? I think those are kind of the two options, a victor or a victim. And if you don't think that we're in a war, and again, in a war in which I'm not called to conquer, to dominate, to oppress, I'm not called to do that. I'm called to occupy until he comes. But if you don't think you're in a war, ask a small businessman. Ask a guy who's trying to make a buck in our society as a small businessman. Ask a teacher if there's a war going on. Ask someone in law enforcement if they feel that there's a war taking place. Ask a pastor who cares about his community, who cares about what's happening to the people that he loves, the people he's called to serve. As he sees families in crisis, ask a pastor if we're in a war. Ask a warrior if we're in a war. Now, I'm going to tell you, Jesus died to win. He already won. The context of occupy till I come is Jesus has already won. It may not look like it, but that's what's real. There's a lot of things that look true that are false, and a lot of things that are false. Jesus won. We don't have to win. We don't have to conquer. We don't have to dominate. We don't have to oppress. We have to occupy. Now, my question is, what am I willing to do in that occupation force? And I ask myself and I ask others often, what would you attempt for God if you knew you would not fail? You'd think differently. You'd plan differently. You'd dream differently. You'd act differently. You'd risk differently. If you were in a Back to the Future situation, or a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court, you'd know when the eclipse is going to take place, and you could make bet on it. If you were in the future and you came back to the present, you'd know what would happen to whatever stock was out there. You'd risk differently. What would you attempt for God if you knew you would not fail? The problem with most of us is we're terrified to do anything. We don't want to lose what we have, and we don't care enough to do something. Be challenged. I'm not playing. And sadly, too many in our society and in our government and in our churches, they're playing. Jesus said, occupy till I come. Winston Churchill said, wars are not won by evacuation. He said that on June 4th, 1940. Now, I am not quitting. These things won't mean anything to you, but I'm going to just go through them real fast because it's just a little story. So I don't talk about it to folks usually, so most folks aren't aware of it. But we just went through a Federal Communications Spectrum auction. That was a contrived crisis by the government to take away spectrum from small independent broadcasters and give it to big corporations. It will reduce independent voices in our nation. Now, there's other reasons for it as well. Doesn't matter. I'm a broadcaster. One of my jobs is I'm a broadcaster. And I've been fighting with the Federal Communications Commission and Congress for quite a few years to protect the voices of independent broadcasters, specifically religious broadcasters. But it looks like we lost because the auction has gone through, and we've started getting 120-day letters from T-Mobile telling us that we have to shut stations down. In fact, I have to start shutting stations down. I'm a TV broadcaster. I have to start shutting some of my TV stations down next month. And I'm not quitting. God didn't call me to conquer. God didn't even call me to win. He has already won. He called me to occupy. I'm part of the occupation force. My father was a World War II hero, a commando. He was trained to kill people with guns, knives, piano wire. His youngest brother went into the service at the end of the war as part of the occupation force in Japan. An occupation force is there to kind of help reestablish order. Are we doing that? An occupation force is there to help manage the peace. Some of us don't even have peace ourselves. We're bad examples. We need to get right with God. We need to have the peace of God because it's the peace of God that people need. And when they see the peace of God in our lives, they'll wonder, man, where'd you get that? I need some. And then we can tell them the reason for our hope. There's a battle, but that battleground is the world. It's not just in America. Now, I'm not quitting. In fact, 2 weeks ago, I bought 70 more TV stations, knowing that I was going to have to shut some of them down. Because I'm part of an occupation force, for crying out loud. I'm supposed to be announcing the love of God and the coming of the Messiah. I'm sorry. We're all called. Every one of us has an assignment, and some of us are simply not even asking God, what am I supposed to do? And I'm challenging you. Don't listen to me. Just ask God, what does He want you to do? Don't get locked up in yesterday. Don't let your past define your future. Some of us are young. Some of us are old. Some of us are my age. I'm young. We don't have the right to say, I'm too old to do something. We don't know what we can do. With God, all things are possible. That's what it says. Some of you went to Cuba, and you helped with our mission with the Today with God project in Cuba. Thank you. Thank you. There's a war on for the hearts and the souls and the minds of people who have been told for decades there is no God, but there is a God. He sent His Son to reveal Himself to us so we would be drawn to Him, so that we could know His peace and we could share that peace and we could be part of the occupation force. There's 46 pastors in Cuba right now who've lost all their support. And it's pathetic. It's pathetic. A pastor and his family who will go out and preach the gospel. They'll go door to door. Talk to Manuela. She'll tell you about it. For $50 a month, that family and that pastor can be supported for $50 a month. And he will do the work of the kingdom in a nation that has denied the existence of God since the revolution. I've thought about retiring when I was younger. God knows when I fulfilled the assignment He gave me, and I haven't. We met with the Metropolitan Archbishop of the Church of India, Pakistan, Burma, and Ceylon. Those are outdated names because it goes back to the time of the Church of England. But the Metropolitan Archbishop wants the Today with God project in 10 languages. And the curriculum that this church helped develop, 10 languages. They have committed, if I can provide it to them in 10 languages, they will personally oversee it being distributed to 10,000 churches at a time when Christianity is being run out in many parts of India. There's a radical faction arising in... They want to change the name to Hindustan. Compassion International has left India. Christians aren't having a real good time in some parts of the nation. They helped us. This wonderful gentleman and his wife helped us build a leprosy clinic in India to reach out to the least, the last, and the lowest. That's what Jesus would do. That's what He's called us to do. So, I'm willing to say that my life is being redefined. Are you willing to say that? Are you so satisfied with your life that there's no reason to change? Are you so complacent? Have you done so much that there's nothing left for you to do? Or are you willing to say, God, what is my assignment today? To take a step, whatever that step is, it's none of my business. He'll give you another one tomorrow if you take one today. But if you've gotten in the habit of not taking a step, shame on you. If you don't trust Him enough to take a step, don't expect Him to give you the next one. But if you take that first step, He'll show you what to do and He'll help you, He'll equip you, He'll empower you. Maybe we should all ask God what changes He wants for us in these final days of our occupation. I want to tell you that World War II was almost lost in June of 1940 when Winston Churchill said, "Wars are not won by evacuation." The Allied troops of Britain, France, and Belgium were being annihilated by Hitler's forces. Annihilated, decimated. You've heard of Dunkirk in the movie, and Dunkirk Harbor is physically located in northern France. 68,000 souls perished in a very short period of time. The miracle of Dunkirk, it was a bloody 8-day evacuation. 338,226 Allied troops were saved. There were over 400,000 troops there. 68,000 died. 338,226 were saved, and Christian Europe was spared. A total of 933 ships were used in the Dunkirk evacuation. Of those 933, 700 were small civilian vessels. One as little as 14 feet. It's in a museum in England. The call went out to the nation. Our army is going to be decimated. We can't even evacuate them. We don't have enough ability, resources to get them out. The Nazis are going to kill them all. We need your help. And a call went out to the nation. 700 people volunteered their fishing boats, their yachts, their paddle steamers, lifeboats, pleasure craft. And they succeeded in sparing 338,226 soldiers. Civilians were asked to volunteer. We know about the heroes. I'm not here to talk about the heroes. What would I have done if I was there? I know what my father would have done because he was a hero. I don't know what I would have done, and I don't ever want to find out. What would you have done if you were there? What if someone called out to you and said, there's 400,000 people are going to die. We need your boat. We need you to take a risk. How would you have answered the call? How would I have answered the call? 700 cooperated. I'm wondering how many refused. How many said, I'm too old, I'm too weak, I'm too sick, I'm too scared, it's too risky, I'm too poor? How many said, I'd like to help, but I need to keep fishing? I got to feed my family. How many said, I'm a shopkeeper, not a warrior. It's not my job. I don't know. We know about the heroes. When someone doesn't want to do something, one excuse is as good as another. The distance between Dunkirk and the White Cliffs of Dover in England is between 43 and 97 miles, depending on the route that one would take. It's not very far, is it? The English Channel was mined. There were Nazi submarines. There were shoreline batteries of artillery pummeling the ships that were trying to cross the channel. It was a really dangerous journey, 43 miles to 97 miles, the route, because they were trying to avoid getting shot and sunk in the water, or mined, or torpedoed. It was a dangerous journey, but it wasn't very far. There were many heroes. We don't know. I don't know how many refused, but I wonder, for those who did refuse, and I might have been one of them had I been there, how would I have felt? How would you have felt afterwards if you'd have said, I got other things to do. I can't risk it. I'm afraid. I'm so afraid. I'm a coward. I can't go. How did they feel afterwards when they saw the 338,000 British, French, and Belgian troops across that 43-mile gap, and they knew they didn't help? How many left and went to help, but they wanted to turn back after they were sailing into enemy fire? How many saw their friends' boats sinking and decided they wanted to quit? Well, once you're out in the channel and you're on the way, it's probably no turning back. Some volunteers, I want you to think about this, some of the volunteers who sent their boats or who went themselves probably knew soldiers trapped across that 43-mile gap. It's a small world. And they were fighting only 43 miles away. And England wasn't that big. To have hundreds of thousands of troops on the verge of death, they had to know some of those people. How many of them were sons, grandsons, husbands, fathers, friends? How many understood that if they failed, Hitler's victory meant their enslavement and defeat anyway? They were going to probably lose very, very quickly. Hitler was eating Europe up. England was next. There was a personal impact on the people who went. If they didn't go, they probably were going to lose friends, relatives, neighbors, and ultimately their own freedom. Personal impact makes a difference. I'm going to challenge you. What if the situation was different? I have to ask this question because I don't know the answer. Maybe you can help me figure this out. But put yourself in that situation. Where they were, what they were doing. Would you have gone? I might have been convinced to go because I would be clear thinking enough to know if I didn't go, I was probably going to suffer a horrible consequence for not going anyway. Not just being labeled a coward or not a patriot. But the war was going to end very badly. I'm asking the question, what if it was different? How many would have volunteered? What if life, this is going to hit close to home for some of you, what if life would have gone on unchanged without even a glitch in your fantasy football? Would you have gone? If there was no personal loss for not going, would you have gone? What if they knew nobody was at risk personally? They didn't know the people there. You don't know who's going to die. They're just people. You had no risk to yourself, and what if you didn't know the distance? Some of those people probably had traversed that 43 miles under peacetime often. Some of them probably could have sailed there with their eyes closed. What if you were asked to go somewhere and you didn't even know how to get there? You didn't know how far it was. What if you didn't know if you were going to have enough fuel to get there? What if you didn't know if after you got there wasn't going to be enough fuel to return? What if you didn't even know what the final destination was? Would you go? Would you go even if you didn't like the people? They weren't your sons, your fathers, your husbands, your neighbors, your friends. They were people you didn't know, but you knew you didn't like them. Would you go? What if the people that were in danger didn't even believe they needed to be rescued? Would you go to an unknown place, not knowing if you could make it back or if you would die in the process, to go help someone who didn't even know they were in danger? What if they didn't even want to be saved? Would you go? Yet this is our call to a lost post-Christian society. What if the cost is unknown, the outcome equally uncertain? We don't know if we're going to win or lose. Would you go? Would we still volunteer? If so, I'm here to challenge you to talk to God. Speak with one of your pastors. Get involved enough to be a part of the occupation force, regardless of the cost, because there's no greater cost than intentional, outright, knowledgeable disobedience. Don't be that person. I'm not telling you what to do, and it's none of my business. Ask God. We are in a war. How will we respond? Will we be good stewards and occupy till he comes? Jesus is coming. Look busy. I'm not here to define your call. It's none of my business. My own life is being redefined. None of you are too young or too old. None of you. None of you are too rich or too poor, too strong or too weak. The question is, are you willing? Do you think God knows what he's doing? Are you willing to entrust your life to him and just ask him to take charge? I'm calling you to serve. Pray. And I'm finishing early. The only thing a good preacher could do, that's the only good part. I'm finishing early. Pastor?
Challenging message. Last week, Steve challenged us to dare to dream.